derivatives are going to like absolutely explode. We need to be positioned such that we can benefit from that, growth. We need to change something about the status quo of DeFi derivatives, right? We need to actually find a way to make DeFi derivatives 10x better than their off-chain or traditional finance CeFi equivalents.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Edge Podcast. I'm DeFi Dad here with Nomadic from 4RC. Today's show features InfinityPools, a new decentralized exchange designed to offer unlimited leverage on any asset with no liquidations, no counterparty risk, and no oracles. In this episode, we'll interview the co-founder of InfinityPools about this promising 0-to-1 innovation for decentralized perps with unlimited assets to be listed, faster permissionless listings, and 10x more leverage than you'll find anywhere else on chain. But before we do, just a quick word from our sponsors who make the Edge podcast possible. For most of us, our crypto journey started with MetaMask. And now with MetaMask Portfolio, we can do so much more. MetaMask Portfolio puts you in control. Use the dashboard to see all your assets and balances across your wallets in one place. The buy feature allows us to buy crypto assets effortlessly with fiat options such as PayPal or credit card. The swap feature allows us to swap any tokens anytime by finding a selection of available rates. The bridge feature allows us to bridge between networks including Ethereum, L1s, and L2s based on the best price and fastest delivery time. And with the stake feature, anyone in a few clicks can stake ETH and earn rewards. Do more in Web3 your way with a safe, simple, and convenient tool that's all in one place. Track and manage your Web3 everything at metamask.io/portfolio. Whether you're a trader, farmer, analyst, or newbie, you can trade smart with KYBERSWAP, the OG decentralized exchange and aggregator on 13 chains. Swap at the best rates, farm with real yields, set limit orders, use their proprietary trading and AI tools with the best UX in DeFi, securely and permissionlessly. Get better rates, better opportunities, better alpha, and a better trading experience. Trade smart now at KYBERSWAP.com.
It all started so simply with CryptoKitties and Maker on Ethereum, but quickly became complex with more applications and many chains. Today, everyone agrees UX issues are the biggest blocker standing in the way of crypto adoption. Introducing AVOCADO. Multi-chain UX redesigned from the ground up. The first wallet to abstract networks, accounts, and gas. One gas tank to pay transaction fees on all chains. In USDC, and native access to INSTADAPP's powerful, custom DeFi strategies. AVOCADO, one wallet to rule all chains.
All right, so let's introduce Matthieu, the co-founder and CEO at InfinityPools. He previously graduated from Columbia University with a degree in computer science, and after graduation would go on to work as a quant, a researcher, and a product manager. Matthieu, welcome to the Edge Podcast. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me on, guys. Pleasure to be here.
We are just really excited for InfinityPools because it seems like a new design that's going to actually transform the way that we trade perps on chain. And so today, what we're going to do, given the fact that InfinityPools is still in beta and we hope or think that it's coming out very soon, so we're going to talk through what we can while the product is not fully live and try to dumb down how we as users might look to use it, while also covering all of the information you need to know to understand the design and, of course, some of the risks to using InfinityPools. But Matthieu, could we talk then about your crypto story? We always love to get people's background and just learn a bit about what drew you in. It's kind of the common starting point for all of us in crypto. So anyways, how did you get started with crypto and what led you ultimately to start on InfinityPools?
Yeah, so that story goes a long way back. I've always kind of had one foot in crypto, but I really started my freshman year at college. I was on these on the engineering only floor. So everyone on my floor was actually an engineer, which is an incredibly nerdy thing to do. But one of my neighbors was like one of the first users of Coinbase and pitched Bitcoin mining to me as a quick way to make $30 a month. And, back then we were using the college campus's electricity, which was free. And so, just started like Bitcoin mining in my dorm room on my laptop, which obviously wasn't incredibly powerful, but still, made a little money. Eventually got more and more into it, especially as the price went up. And that's kind of like how I originally got into it.
Matthieu, love the backstory. That's one of the cooler crypto backstories I think I've heard so far. But did you get caught doing this? Were the electricity bills noticed?
No, so they weren't actually, because a few different reasons. Number one, it was like a building-wide electricity bill, I think. So it wasn't like anything that you could track back to one room. And number two, back then, it was like 2013. Like nobody knew what Bitcoin was. So I think they assumed that I was like grilling food in my or something.
So this is like your public admission. Hopefully nothing comes of this now that you've
statutes of limitation, baby. No, I'm kidding.
All right, let's get into InfinityPools a bit. I think maybe before we jump into describing what it is, I still kind of want to know how it came together. Like, okay, you're doing this Bitcoin mining in your dorm. Obviously, some time passed and you had this idea, but yeah, how did it come together? I know you raised money like 2 years ago now, and presumably you've been working on it ever since. So maybe fill us in on kind of those missing pieces as well.
The interesting story is that when we originally raised money for a company, which is, technically Lemma Labs is the company building the InfinityPools protocol. So when we raised money for Lemma Labs originally, we were building a completely different protocol. We kind of came in, it was, like 2021, 2020, 2020, I believe. And I, had like this thesis that DeFi derivatives, were about to like absolutely explode. I saw perpetual protocol, like starting to like get some volume. Back then they were still on XDAI, which is, like big throwback for like the OG derivatives people in DeFi, and DYDX still hadn't like started their liquidity mining campaign, which is what really started it all. And we were like, derivatives are gonna like absolutely explode. We need to be positioned such that we can benefit from that growth. And so our original protocol was built on top of these different like perp dexes. The problem that we very, very quickly realized is that perp dexes were not like Uniswap. They were essentially copy and paste of what was already existing off-chain and essentially just transported on-chain. And so what you ended up with is a product that, didn't have KYC, didn't have custody of your assets, but it had a way worse performance and no tangible 10x benefits. And so, we didn't really see the growth that we wanted to see, right? Like volumes definitely exploded for a while, but then we're stagnant. So we were, this was compounded with like other things that obviously led to us, thinking like, we need to change something about the status quo of DeFi derivatives, right? We need to actually find a way to make DeFi derivatives 10x better than their off-chain or traditional finance CeFi equivalents alternative. And so actually, originally, the way that we started researching the protocol and, the original problem that we were trying to crack is just how do we have futures on the long tail of assets. And, that's how we originally, really kind of like got into like the InfinityPools architecture. And we found out that turns out that, it could do way more than just that. It had like 5 different 10x improvements. So that was kind of like how we were originally started like working towards the problem of, solving some of like the things that we had seen in the perp dex landscape. So then you asked about raising money. I think that raising money in that environment 100% was easier to do. I think that a lot of VCs, a lot of investors agree with us on our thesis that derivatives are going to explode, right? And we still maintain that this thesis is true. I think that the only thing that's changed is the time scale, right? So we still believe that this is going to happen, but instead of happening in 1 or 2 years, it's going to happen over a five-year horizon. In the end, for us, it was honestly quite easy raising money. We had more term sheets than we knew what to do with. We ended up picking the people that we believed were the best fit. That was kind of it.
In the intro, I mentioned that there's unlimited leverage. You can trade any asset once this is live. There's no liquidations. There's no oracles. I mean, it's kind of like a wish list of what we all are looking for from DeFi Perps. Now, Nomadic and I have actually reviewed, I think, really all of the major Perps trading protocols, maybe other than DYDX, on the show this year. And they all have their own flavor, but they look pretty similar. You tend to see a bunch of liquidity pooled. That pool, in whether it's segregated by markets or it's all in one, acts as the counterparty to traders. Traders are, they're ultimately borrowing, they're paying borrowing fees, they're paying funding rates. At the end of the day, it's player versus player. And it's all happening within that protocol. There's no liquidity being sourced, other than maybe Contango we just reviewed, where they loop it on Aave. So the fact that you actually are benefiting from the liquidity within Uniswap here is what's really interesting. So I don't know, maybe we could start there, or again, however you want to talk through that piece by piece, how those features differentiate from the legacy trading experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the best way to think about it, right? Is that the reason that we're so different, that InfinityPools is so different from every protocol out there, is because we rebuilt really the notion of derivatives and what a derivative is supposed to be from the ground up, right? We essentially thought about, what futures are, what perpetual futures are, and essentially from a first principles perspective, rebuilt the entire stack from the ground up. So maybe a easy, intuitive way to think about it is, what is a perpetual future? A perpetual future is essentially just a one-day future that gets rolled over automatically, right? That gets rolled over every single day, right? And the payment for that future, right? That traders pay is called the funding rate, right? So when you pay that funding rate, what you're actually doing is that you're paying for this one-day future that gets rolled over, right? That's easy, intuitive way to think about it. What we did is quite similar, but instead of futures, what we do is that we roll over something like options. So it looks like perpetual futures in the front end, but in the back end, it's actually much more similar to an options protocol. There's obviously a lot more nuance to it, but in this case, options are just a much, much better instrument to create derivatives than futures. And there's a bunch of different reasons for that, but at a super high level, because it's such a different mechanism, that's why we can offer all these new features. So is this maybe a good time to start sharing my screen to walk people through the protocol?
You read my mind. I was thinking that I'd much rather see it in action than talk through it in theory. So yeah, if you don't mind sharing your screen. By the way, for folks who are listening to this in the future, you can go to our link tree at edge_pod. And then if you just find the YouTube link to this, you can find this and it'll be marked according to chapters in YouTube. So anyways, Matthieu, talk us through or describe what we're looking at here with the InfinityPools beta?
Sure. So, this is one of the pools that you'll be able to access, right? This is a very classic ETHUSDC pool. Here you'll have access to any token, right? You'll be able to look up all markets right now. Because it's a beta, we just have ETHUSDC, but you can imagine that pretty much any token pair you can think of, you'll have access to here. Then you have the docs and the dashboard. The dashboard really is just tracking your portfolio value, et cetera, like positions, stuff like that. And then, this is really, the meat of the trading experience. And, most people should feel as if this is a very, very familiar experience, right? This is nothing drastically new. You have the price, you have trade, earn. Earn is what we call providing liquidity, right? So if you go on earn, very soon you'll be able to see how you're able to provide liquidity. It's extremely simple once again. But maybe can do a separate video for that later. And then if you're trying to trade, you've got long, short. You can deposit either ETH or USDC with collateral. So anytime you have a pool, right? So if you have, for example, if you're trying to trade Chainlink BTC, right? And so you have a pool that's Link BTC, then you would be able to deposit either Link or BTC. So we'll have multi-collateral from the get-go, which is kind of a cool feature that lot of exchanges currently do not have. But in this case, as you can see, my balance of USDC is $800 or $900. All deposits, let's say 100. And then, I can select the leverage or my position size. In this case, usually I can go up to 1,000x leverage, I think, with our beta. Or let's maybe start with a more conservative 500x. Seems like we changed some of the liquidity things in the pool, because this is all real accumulate. Oh, sorry, I'm putting 7,000x leverage right now.
I was going to say, oh wow, we're up to 7,000x leverage. Matthieu, as you're punching this in, so this is a very familiar setup, really simple looking user interface. For those of us who would want to long or short ETH, we would come to InfinityPools. You've already pointed out we have the ease of depositing as collateral like we do on every other perps trading UI. We would deposit here either USDC or ETH, so one of the two tokens in the pair. And then per usual now, we're picking our leverage, which determines our total position size. And in this case, you've got 700x leverage. What I'm wondering here then is, what are the considerations here below as I look at the order details of interest rate, hourly, and so on? Because this is different. This is really what stands out to me, other than the humongous number available for leverage. I'm used to looking at that and knowing that, okay, my liquidation's here, or I'm going to set a stop loss here. That's really an enormous incentive or driving force in other designs of perps. And so that's not here. We can't be liquidated. So is it strictly the interest rate hourly that's going to scare folks off from doing stupid things with super high leverage? Or anyways, can you take it away from there?
Yeah, for sure. So as you said, this is definitely where things get super interesting, right? So number one, you've got the execution price and the market impact. Actually, the two kind of go hand in hand, right? So the execution price and the market impact is really just you opening your long or short position, right? It's you getting positioned into your long or short. And we actually use 1inch on the back end to do this, which means that on any coin that you trade on InfinityPools, from day one, you'll actually have access to the best liquidity in the entire spot market, which is why what you're seeing right now is actually what you're going to get on day zero of InfinityPools on mainnet, right? And actually, what's really interesting, do you see how like the market impact just turned green? That's positive slippage, right? So like you could actually get positive slippage on InfinityPools when entering a position. So that's the first thing to like, keep in mind. And then below that, you get the interest rate hourly. So it seems like a lot, right? It's 1.7%, which is crazy. But then again, you have to remember that you're borrowing 700x what you're putting down, which means that you're obviously like you put down $100 and you're borrowing $70,000. Going long Ethereum, which is a volatile asset. So it makes sense that like the interest rate would be quite high. I think the best way to like think intuitively about the interest rate is by looking at the estimated time to close. And like actually the estimated time to close is probably like the main thing that I look for when I select my leverage. So when I see that the estimated time to close for a position is about 2 minutes, that means that I expect more or less that the price will go up in the next 2-ish minutes, right? It doesn't mean, and if it goes up, like, if it goes up after 2 minutes, I could still make money, right? Because my position doesn't close immediately. Well, actually with like 700x, it does close immediately. So yeah, like 2 minutes is about like the amount of time that you have before the price goes up, before like, like your position closes. And then with, for 700x is actually much longer than you would get on most like perp dexes, right?
Yeah, could I flip that on its head? So I like the way you framed it up. You have, in this case, this is a really extreme example, but this is also one of the, I think this is a really good example of how you've modified the user experience for trading with leverage on chain. And so now you could also think of it as I've got 2 minutes before the 100 USDC that I deposited as collateral is eaten up by the hourly interest rate. So you really can start to think very differently about how you open these positions. Like I'll say I personally tend to trade with, stop losses, and I don't look at my liquidation as like, okay, that's a failed trade. Like I'm not looking to risk the entire position. But folks will, like that's one way to trade, is to trade with a position that you can get liquidated on and say, okay, that was the maximum amount of money I plan to lose on that trade. And so this is really cool. This is for me, it's like a new way to think about it. It makes sense to me too, like the way you described it and seeing it on screen. I also just want to point out the fact that people in crypto generally love leverage. I mean, I'm not going to say that's a good quality that our users seem to all have, but it's giving people the tools to do what they want when they want with their money. And so if you want to go 708x leverage with 100 USDC for a 2-minute trade, you can do that here with InfinityPools.
I think it's like super intuitive and interesting, like tapping into an aggregator like 1inch to kind of like source liquidity all throughout DeFi. I mean, we always talk about composability and like that's the dream, protocols building on top of other protocols. And I've kind of seen us gone away from that a little bit as other protocols have gotten maybe like more greedy to kind of have the whole stack or something like that. But in this case, you just spin up a 1inch and kind of do what they're doing. But I would imagine like they're pretty happy with this arrangement, kind of like you funneling, I guess, volume and activity through them. Is there any other aggregators you'd be able to use, or is kind of 1inch going to be the de facto? Or
oh yeah, any, right? Like once again, like for InfinityPools, as long as the transaction is atomic, it means we could use any DEX whatsoever, right? So we could use GMX, we could use, like Matcha, we could use, or 0x, I guess. Yeah, literally anything works. We just chose 1inch because that's where is, the first one we thought of. But yeah.
Can we talk about what's happening under the hood here? So let's pretend I just opened up a long, I deposited my USDC, I'm longing ETH USDC, and let's pretend like the market goes up during the 2 minutes, and I'm going to eventually close this out with a profit. Can you walk us through from start to finish, from opening to closing, what's happening under the hood?
Sure. Also, I actually want to address like something that you said like earlier that I didn't really get a chance to. But you said that like when you get liquidated or like that's like kind of like how you tend to like like close your positions like when like it doesn't go well. A big difference between InfinityPools and I would say most perp dexes is that we don't have liquidations, right? We have what we call like a closing of the position, right? Like when your collateral like runs out, and like some people might be like, well, like aren't those the same thing? Like it's essentially like your position gets closed against your will. There's actually a huge difference. Like really important to get the terminology on this right, because liquidations come along with liquidation penalties. Liquidation penalties, they can be anywhere from, when FTX was around and we all knew that they were like scamming everyone, right? Like, and people were like, oh, liquidation penalties are not that bad. Well, there's a reason that they weren't that bad is because they weren't actually liquidating anyone. And look where we ended up to like, so like basically it can go from like 50 bips all the way up to like 3%, right? And I'm talking like 3% of like your entire position, not your collateral. That means that, when you get liquidated, you're actually losing a lot more money than you're supposed to. So basically, using stop losses actually way better way to like get out of a position rather than just letting the market do its thing. And sometimes like even those don't work, right? Just because like the market moves so fast that the exchange just decides that like it's time to liquidate you before your stop loss kicks in. Okay, so what's happening with InfinityPools behind the hood, right, is that what's happening is that when you click long here, right, if I were to click place order here, a couple of things would happen. The first thing that would happen is that our backend would see that order. It'd be like, okay, this person is trying to go long this amount of like money. So this is how much like, they're trying to borrow. They would look at the InfinityPools liquidity, right? So like at our AMM and see how much liquidity is in this AMM. And then basically pick and choose which LP positions need to be borrowed in order to get the trader the exposure that they want for the lowest interest rate. And the process, right, like when our backend essentially picks and chooses which LP positions get borrowed, we call that a routing engine or a matching engine. You can kind of think of it as a Uniswap router type thing, but for interest rates, right? So what it's really doing is that it's optimizing the interest rates that you pay for borrowing these different LP shares. So very much like margin trading, right? What happens is that, to go long Ethereum, for example, in margin trading, what's happening is that you're borrowing cash, right? You're borrowing USD, and then you're swapping that USD over to Ethereum to go long Ethereum, right? So that's what happens with margin trading. With InfinityPools, what you're doing is that you're borrowing LP tokens. You're backed by USDC, right? Like backed by USDC, and then you're taking that USDC and you're swapping it for Ethereum, and that's how you go long Ethereum. So the borrowing of these LP tokens, once again, is done taking liquidity from our AMM. Then we're taking that USDC that backs these LP tokens and we're swapping them over to Ethereum using 1inch. So this is how you're entering into the long position. And yeah, that's really that's all there is to it.
Matthieu, what happens then when we close that position? So I think I'm understanding that entering it, we borrow an LP, you're doing some swapping, and that's what enables me to get that leverage. And actually, if we can talk about the two different examples here, let's say I'm long and the market moves in my favor. So now I'm in profit and we're going to close the position. And then can we talk about if the market moves against me, and let's say my position is closed out in 2 minutes because the market's down and I'm at a loss.
Sure. So let's actually make this concrete, right? So let's say I've got 10x leverage, right? So here it's per month, for example. Okay. So what happens when I want 10x leverage? Well, basically, what happens, right, is and let's say that the market price in Ethereum is $1,000, just to make things super simple. Market price of Ethereum is $1,000. What happens here, right, is that once again our backend is going to look at our AMM, is going to be like, okay, I need to borrow LP positions to enable 10x leverage, and in order to do that, it needs to borrow LP positions where the midpoint is $900, right? So 10% below market price, right? Because 10% below market price is where the theoretical liquidation would be otherwise with 10x leverage, right? So matching engine, routing engine looks at the MM, goes, okay, I need to combine LP tokens such that the midpoint is $900. What that means is that it can either borrow LP positions at $900, right? Or it can borrow LP positions at $850 and $950 and combine them to create that $900 liquidity position, right? So that's the first step, right? Go borrow this LP position. And then let's say that this LP position is backed by 1,000 USDC, right? So it will take this 1,000 USDC, right? Swap it for ETH at the current market price, which is one Ethereum, right? So basically, the trader will be long 1 Ethereum. At this point, if the price goes up, right, the trader can sell that 1 Ethereum for, let's say the price of Ethereum goes up to $1,500. The trader can take that 1 Ethereum, sell it for $1,500, and then take that $1,500, pocket $500 in profit, and then use the remaining 1,000 USDC to mint back the LP positions, right, at $900. Because once again, nothing's changed there, right? Like all you need to do is pay the loan back. If the price moves against you, that's where things get interesting, right? So let's say in this case, the trader borrowed a single LP position at $900. Well, the price goes down to $900, then the trader who has 1 Ethereum on their balance sheet can only sell that 1 Ethereum for $900, right? So they need $1,000 to pay back the loan. So basically, they're $100 in the hole. They've got $100 loss. So let's call that the max loss at $900, right? So here it means that their starting collateral has to be at least $100. If the price of Ethereum falls below $900, what happens? Well, the liquidity provider, right, that was at $900, no longer expects back $1,000 back, right? They're no longer expecting 1,000 USDC back. What they're expecting back is 1,000 USDC converted into Ethereum at the $900 price point, which means that it's 1.1 Ethereum, right? 1,000 USDC converted to Ethereum at $900 is 1.1 Ethereum. Trader already has 1 Ethereum on their balance sheet, which means that all they need is an extra 0.1 Ethereum. 0.1 Ethereum is always worth less than $100 below $900. So no matter where the price goes, the maximum loss for the trader versus their debt, which is denominated in this LP token, is $100. If the maximum loss is $100 and the maximum amount of the money they can borrow is $1,000, right, as we saw in this example, then that's 10x leverage.
For the estimated time to close here, is that going to be changing on us? Like, I'm looking at that right now. Estimated time to close is 4 months. If the price of ETH changes, which it's always changing, let's pretend it goes down. Let's pretend we go from $1,800 per ETH to $1,000 per ETH. Would our estimated time to close change then on that open position?
So the estimated time to close is specifically if the price doesn't move. If the price goes down, then yes, it would. The estimated time to close would also go down, potentially, because it's a little bit complicated. But essentially, InfinityPools uses unrealized P&L to keep the position going, right? So, like for example, on top of your collateral that you put up front, on top of that, what happens is that we also use unrealized P&L to keep your position going, right? So for example, if I go long 700x, right, Ethereum, and my position makes a shit ton of money, well, doesn't mean that it's actually going to close in 2 minutes, right? Because once again, InfinityPools is just going to use all that unrealized P&L to keep the position going. So theoretically, I could keep that 700x like position open as long as I can, or like as like, you know, as long as it permits me to, right? Like even days or like weeks or whatever. Similarly, when the price doesn't move, we basically use kind of like that unrealized P&L that's like kind of there but not really there to keep your position going. So it like keeps it going for like 4 months in this case. If it goes down, that unrealized P&L no longer exists. So basically, it's a little bit hard to understand, but you start with positive unrealized P&L, and then if the price goes down, then you no longer have that starting positive like unrealized P&L. So it does go down.
This makes sense. You're opening a position, and you can think of it as the unrealized P&L is being eaten up if the market's moving against your directional bet. And once you get down to no P&L, you're now in the negative and you're eating up your collateral. So I really am starting to like understand that like there's just a reframing of how you view your position here, but you're using, and I think this is using some of the wording in the white paper and some of your blog posts, like you use just, you know, a very like concrete or like certain math here to ensure that the position can be paid back without going the route of liquidation penalties. It really is like a huge shift in the way that we've seen perps designed. And I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking like this is a great way for someone who wants to access the deep liquidity on something like Uniswap to open up a levered position for an extended period of time with what I'm hoping is a more stable funding rate, a less volatile funding rate. Maybe that's actually something you should speak to, is how stable or volatile you expect the funding rate here in comparison to existing decentralized perps products.
Yeah, that's actually a fantastic question. So there's really like two perspectives to this, but like specifically I'll talk about like the trading perspective, right? So as a trader, what can I expect the funding rate to be like? In a perfectly efficient market, this funding rate should be very close to options premiums, right? So it should be very, very close to options premiums. Now, will it actually always be that case? Or like, will that always be the case? Well, not necessarily. Okay, so, right, there's really two scenarios. The funding rate goes below the funding, the options premiums, or it goes above the options premiums. So let's say that the funding rate goes below the options premiums. Well, in that case, there's actually a super simple arbitrage that you can do on InfinityPools. You'd probably have to use the API to do it like really well. But if the funding rate is too small or like too cheap, basically what you can do is that you can create simultaneously a long and a short position, right? That takes advantage of this cheap funding rate, right? And essentially what you're betting on is that the price is going to move more by more than like what you're paying in funding up front, right? And then you can just like, it's what's commonly like referred to in options as a strangle, right? So you basically just create like a 1000x leverage strangle and an expectation you make money. So kind of like a statistical arbitrage to like push the funding rate up. So that's super capital efficient arbitrage to push the funding rate up. That's one thing. If the funding rate is too high or you perceive it to be too high, the cool thing about InfinityPools is that there's really two things as a trader that you can do. The first thing is that you can, we're actually like working on like implementing this feature, but we're going to have what's called an interest rate threshold or tolerance, where basically your position just unwinds once funding rate exceeds a certain threshold, right? So basically like, unlike perps where you're obliged to like pay the like funding rates or you have to like exit the market, with us it's just you stop renewing your position, so you kind of like exit the market with no slippage. But then the other thing, right, that also like conceptually makes sense is that you can just provide liquidity, right? If the funding rate is too high, well, guess what? You can just click on earn here and, you know, provide liquidity instead of like trading. And, you know, you might ask, well, like, why don't you just do that like in like perp markets, right? Well, it can perp markets like providing liquidity is much more difficult, right? Because like you need to have like an entire like setup, and like, you know, you don't get like fully paid out like on all the fees if you have like limit orders, et cetera, right? So it's a much more involved process. With us, you know, like you're providing liquidity to AMM, so it's you know, from a retail perspective in particular, it's much easier. And on top of that, you'll like, and there are a bunch of reasons for this, but we're really targeting passive liquidity providers, right? So there's going to be zero, in fact, market makers. We're working with zero market makers. And like a lot of people are going to be like, oh shit, like, isn't that really bad? Well, yes and no, right? Like there's a reason that like a lot of people, for example, refuse to trade on exchanges where Citadel is the market maker, right? Because they know that like Citadel is like almost never going to give them an edge. You know, one of the things that I always hear from like market makers is like, oh, like the dumber you are in you know, finance or like in stocks, like the better price like we're going to give you. And it's like quite well known, you know, that the more uninformed flow is like what gives you the best prices. And so, yeah, basically like not having market makers on the other side is actually like also potentially a good thing. And in particular here, that could be like a very good thing. And yeah, I kind of like went on a tangent there, but hopefully that makes sense that, yeah, like if funding rates are high, just go provide liquidity. It's super easy and it will make you a ton of money.
Matthieu, something I wanted to ask you about when you were going through an earlier example, just using high leverage, is just about latency and how you're thinking about that, or if that's even important in this whole arrangement. Just, for some of this stuff, I'd imagine it's got to be pretty timely. And maybe that's like a broader question of like, I don't know what chain you're building on or kind of like where you're building. So if you could kind of package all that together with your answer, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, I'm going to give a huge shout out to our engineering team because we've managed to get like real lucky with our hires. We haven't like really published a team page so far, but our team is incredibly impressive. And like obviously everyone's going to say that, but we've managed to build an extremely high performance system. It's all built in Scala from head to toe. Basically, like the back end, like the front end, like everything is extremely high performance. Like some of like the like top like engineering in the entire space. So from the get go, like we've been super mindful with performance, latency, especially when it comes to like this like super high leverage, right? Like you want to be able to like see stuff like updating extremely fast. If you want, like I can go like a little bit like deeper into like the backgrounds of our teams, but like we have people from like the top exchanges that like came to like work with us. We have actually a guy who's a professor at Cambridge in the math department that just joined us, part-time professor there, and so it's like we've been very mindful of that. As for the chain, we're still the cool thing about InfinityPools, it's that it's a bit like Uniswap. It's EVM like based. We can launch anywhere we want. Doesn't really matter. What's gonna matter is the liquidity, right? We don't want to fragment liquidity too fast. So we're gonna choose the chain a couple of weeks before we launch. Stick to it for a while, and then that'll be all. But we're gonna choose like a pretty high performance chain. But right now we have like mostly leaning towards the big L2s. You can probably guess which ones.
Got it. And like, I mean, blockchains aren't always notoriously fast. So is there off-chain elements to this? I think I saw something going through the docs about a matching engine.
Oh, that was just the interest rate router that I was talking about. That's it. Yeah. Once again, you can think of it as like the equivalent to like a Uniswap router, right? It's like, it's really just giving you the best interest rate, but except for that, doesn't really serve a purpose.
One other thing that stood out is obviously this like absence of oracles. Could you just tell us how you solve for that? I think I kind of understand it, but maybe just walk us through that.
Yeah, for sure. So, really, there would be two areas where you would need an oracle with a protocol such as this, right? So like this is margin trading, or the easiest analogy, right, is margin trading, right? So you're borrowing and then you're swapping. So for the borrowing and the swapping, you would need potentially like you need prices, right? So for the borrowing, you need to know when to liquidate people. There you go. For the borrowing, you need to know when to liquidate people. And for a swap, you need to know at what price to swap, right? So let's start with the swapping. Well, we use OneInts, right? And theoretically, we can use any spot DEX that's available out there, right? So you don't need an oracle, quite simply because you can use whatever spot price you want, or like you can use whatever spot DEX you want, which means that like, once again, it's completely in the user's hands. They can use whatever they want. In our case, we use OneInch in the back end, so you don't need an oracle, quite simply because we're not the ones doing the swap. And then for the borrowing, right, which is where you would get liquidated. Well, where do we get our price? Well, once again, this is happening by borrowing liquidity out of the InfinityPools AMM, right? And so that means that we need to essentially be able to tell when the InfinityPools by borrowing out of the liquidity. So we're borrowing liquidity out of the InfinityPools AMM, which means that we need to be able to liquidate it at a given price point, right? And like, what is that price point? Or like, not liquidated, but we need to know when it crosses a certain threshold. Well, what is this threshold? Well, once again, because it's an AMM, it has its own internal price. So basically, we just use the internal InfinityPools AMM price to take care of like this price that's needed. Essentially, it's kind of like Uniswap, right? Like, why doesn't Uniswap need a price or an oracle? Why doesn't Uniswap need an oracle? Well, quite simply because like it's just it has its own internal price that gets arbitraged to the correct thing, and same for us.
Matthieu, can we talk a bit about the Infinity LPs? If I'm an LP, am I going to deposit a Uniswap LP, or can I deposit single tokens? And I'm also concerned, if I deposit a single token, am I now exposed to impermanent loss for an LP? Anyways, what can you tell us about what we can expect as future LPs?
Sure, yeah. So if you remember, like in my earlier screen on ETHUSDC, right, there was a trade and then there was an earn, and the earn was kind of like grayed out. When you click on earn, this is more or less where you're going to see. Like, I think the only part that was changed was this one actually. So I won't specifically this one actually, but the rest, including this, is going to be pretty much the same. So I'll kind of like run you through it. So okay, a couple of different things are happening. Number one, as you can see, this is like the Link USDC price, right? And then you got like two little like what's it like best way to like call these, like lines, right? Or like little like sliders. Sliders is the correct word here that you can use. And what these sliders are doing is that they're actually the price range. So here, the price range here corresponds to like where these sliders are, right? So if you increase your price range, you're increasing the slider width here. Then you're depositing Link and USDC, right? So this is just how many assets do you want to deposit to actually provide liquidity to the pool. And then obviously you can just like go full range, which by the way, we for like most like beginner, like, retail LPs, we would recommend, not financial advice, but it's just kind of like, easiest way to get started. So what is actually happening, right? Like behind the scenes, what was like the easiest way to like conceptualize this? Basically, when you're providing liquidity on a spot AMM or on InfinityPools, but on InfinityPools in particular, because you're getting paid up front, what you're really saying is like, hey, I believe that the price is more or less going to stay within this range, right? So basically, what you're selecting here is you're selecting within which range you believe the price will stay, more or less. And then you're getting paid a bunch of fees for, like how long the price actually stays in that range, right? And so, that's like the super high level way to think about it. And then this is where current liquidity is deployed, right? So if you guys know how Uniswap like does it, right? Like they just have this part flipped horizontally. And so in this case, right, like you can kind of see like, okay, like most people like deploy most of their liquidity closer to the midpoint. Okay, so that's the first part. And then there's another really interesting part here, which is the utilization ratio and the 7-day historical APR. So the 7-day historical APR, super easy to understand. In this given range, what have people been getting paid, right? Like what is like the average APR that I'm getting paid for providing liquidity in this range, for betting on the fact that the price is more or less going to be within this range. And then the utilization ratio is actually much more interesting. So the utilization ratio essentially tells you, well, how much of the liquidity within this range is currently being used to trade, right? Like how much of this liquidity, right? How much of like the LP tokens in this range have been borrowed to actually create trades. And the higher the utilization ratio, the more likely it is that you're in expectation going to make money. Because what that means is that basically the interest rate that you get paid as a liquidity provider is made up of two parts. The first part is very similar to like a Black-Scholes type, actually, when your liquidity gets borrowed as a liquidity provider, so that's like when you get paid like an actual interest rate directly from traders, which is, okay, so in that case, like there's really two parts of the interest rate that you get paid. The first part is, once again, this like Black-Scholes type, what we call a floor rate, right? So like this is like the minimum that you can get paid. And you can really think of it as like, hey, I'm selling options. What am I going to get paid? This is the options premium, right? So like the options premium is this floor rate. So the options premium is the minimum that you can get paid. And then what the utilization rate does is that if a lot of people are trying to like buy if a lot of people are trying to like borrow LP tokens, right? If a lot of people are trying to like get leverage, if a lot of people are trying to like create trades on the other side, right? So like on the trade side, then the utilization rate is going to go up and is going to increase this base rate, this floor rate. So basically, you're going to get paid more than options premiums. So the higher the utilization rate is, the more you're going to get paid than options premiums. And the more you get paid than options premiums, then the more you can expect to essentially make, right? The more you can essentially like expect to like get back in return, right? Because this is simple math, right? Like if I'm getting paid like way above options premiums, then it means that like I'm getting overpaid. So as an LP, a good strategy or like something that I would look out for is pools with high utilization rates, right? Because what that most likely means is that somebody is getting like LPs in this particular pool are getting overpaid. So I'll stop here for a second and just see if there are any questions.
What sort of risks do we face as LPs? Like, I'm trying to understand, is there any risk of like bad debt?
Zero bad debt. Zero counterparty risk. That's correct.
Right. Zero counterparty risk. You are exposed as an LP, you are exposed to impermanent loss, which is standard for the LP experience in Uniswap.
Yeah, what people call impermanent loss, right, is just whenever the price goes outside of this band, right? So like if the price goes outside of this band, people call that impermanent loss, right? So there's a trade-off that happens. The first thing is that you get paid more than Uniswap, right? The yields, or actually, let me start with like the con, right? Let me start with the bad news first. The bad news is that unlike, and this is like kind of like a good news, bad news kind of situation where it's you cannot withdraw your liquidity immediately, right? So unlike Uniswap, right? Let's say that like I want to withdraw my liquidity, I cannot do that immediately unless I pay a small fee. So if I really think that like shit's going like down like immediately, like with Luna, then I can pay a small fee to like withdraw my liquidity. But if I want to withdraw my liquidity immediately, I cannot do it for free. So that is like the one thing that people are taking a risk on. If people do want to like, withdraw their liquidity for free, then what they can do is that they can start the withdrawal process, and then it's exponential. So basically, it just goes down like this, right? So like every day you get 50% back. So you get 50% back the first day, and then 25% back the second day, 12.5%, et cetera, et cetera. And in like 7 days, essentially like 99.9, I think is like, or like 99, or like more than 99% is back. So in like less than 7 days, essentially you get like almost all of your assets back. So that is like one kind of like con that like people might see to it. This is also a pro in some sense, right? Because what it means is that you don't have people like SCT or like, really like big MEV like market makers coming in and essentially taking all the profits by doing just-in-time liquidity, right? Like nobody can come in and steal your yields, right? So this is fantastic for retail and people that are really just trying to, make passive yields, right? Like this is much better avenue to do that. And then the good news is also the fact that in return for locking up your liquidity like this, you get paid more than Uniswap, right? Like the yields are just higher than Uniswap because even when your liquidity is out of range, right? So let's say that, for example, instead of my slider being here, right, my slider was here, right? So nowhere near like the current price range. I would still get paid yield. And that's pretty crazy, right? Like I get paid yield even when my liquidity is out of range.
Matthieu, we've kept you way over here, but we just have a few more questions that we want to hit you with. One that I was just thinking of is there going to be a token with InfinityPools, and have you thought through like how it will function within the protocol?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've definitely like seen, what's happened like recently with like Uniswap and, like the equity company trying to take a cut, and then like, the complaints from like the token holders. InfinityPools is very, very different as a protocol from Uniswap. So I don't want to draw too many parallels because, there are a lot more ways to monetize, basically like both for the equity and for the token. So there is a future where like both could receive a fee, unlike once again Uniswap. We haven't like really made any decisions yet on that front. We kind of like want to see how it plays out. And yeah, once again, there's no hurry. If anything, we really see like the token as a mix of a growth lever and a way to like govern the protocol when it launches. But all I can say at this point is no decisions have been made.
Well, Matthieu, this is a good place for us to start to wrap up. I first want to remind listeners that they should learn more about InfinityPools at infinitypools.finance. You can enter your email there too if you want to get updates on the project, including the anticipated launch, which as of the recording here at the end of October, we're hopeful that it might be live in November, December, but we'll find out in just a moment from Matthieu. Also, you can follow InfinityPools on Twitter. It's INFPools. You can follow Matthieu. We'll flash his handle here on screen as well, or you can find it in the show notes. And then Matthieu, we'd love to just hear as like a closing to the podcast. What does the roadmap look like for the next, let's say, 6 to 12 months? Of course, when are we going to see InfinityPools go live? It's currently in this like sandbox beta that we've been excited to look through today with you.
So, as I said, we should be ready with like our testnet, like honestly, like extremely soon. Definitely, before the new year, and then we're thinking Q1 2024 for like the mainnet release. I'm like there's so many unknowns that like I'm still staying pretty vague with my estimates. Like we've honestly screwed that one up like several times. But when you're building a protocol like from the ground up like this, that's just like never been done before. It's just really, really hard to give estimates because of all the unknown unknowns. So that's the current plan.
It's going to be an exciting new year. We recently talked with the team at INSTADAPP, and they've got this new protocol, Fluid. And so between Fluid and InfinityPools, 2024 could be very fun. Nearly no liquidations on some of the loans they're going to put out are super high LTV. And now with InfinityPools, we're looking at no liquidations and also the highest leverage, at least I've ever seen, of any DeFi product out there. But Matthieu, thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through everything we need to know about InfinityPools. And I hope that we can have you back in the future once the product is live and talk about some of the lessons learned from the new design.
Yeah, would love that too. It's been great chatting with you guys once again. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're a talented founder or developer, please consider reaching out to our team at fourthrevolution.capital. And for future episodes of the Edge podcast, please check out our link tree at edge_pod.